And welcome, everyone, and welcome Joe Domeier to joining us on Art Toolkit. We're
Hello,
so
Maria.
happy to have you here.
Well, it very nice to be there. It's always fun to, as I paper nerd about art supplies, I love talking to folks about it. And hopefully, if you have questions about paper and paint and pigments, et cetera, during this conversation, let me know. But I'm in sunny Minnesota, 65 degrees right now, and we're loving it.
Oh, well, I'm here in Port Townsend, Washington. And those of you joining us, if you want to post to our chat as well, where you're logging in from, and then I'll be keeping an eye on the chat. So if you have any questions throughout this, please don't be shy, and I'll do my best to relay them to Joe, because Joe, you're addressing like a really fundamental material for artists today, like looking at paper. And I gotta confess, like I have been a painter, drawer, sketcher, painter for ever since I can remember.
Yeah.
And I've tried like making my own paper when I was in like the third grade with like a blender and a sieve, and reconstituting. Yeah. But I'm sort of woefully ignorant on where paper comes from and how is it made. We even have a paper mill here in Port Townsend, but I just sort of imagine the logs that, go through some process that involves, some steam and
log in paper. Flat paper out.
Yeah. But quality paper makes an incredible difference. Like I know when I'm painting on paper, that doesn't play nice for watercolor because it makes it so much harder.
Yeah. It starts to bow and buckle quite a bit faster on a lower grade style paper, et cetera.
Yeah. And so the appreciation of having quality paper, it truly does make a difference. The title of your talk today as well, paper makes a difference.
Yeah. And so what we'll go through today is I have a slideshow of sorts, and I'll do narration while we're doing this slideshow, but it's going to talk a little bit about why paper makes a difference. It's going to talk about the history of the modern paper all the way back to 105 AD, all the way to current manufacturing facilities. And we will show videos and slides. I've got a mouse setup that's purple, so you keep an eye on it as I'll be pointing things out as we go through. But it really is going to tell you why paper makes the difference. If you have ever painted on a brand name from a large craft store or what have you, you're going to find that it's a lot different than, say, grabbing one of our products, Hahnemühle branded goods, or Arches paper or Fourdrinier paper. We take pride in what we've done. We have been a mill producing paper since 1584.
Wow. So, wow. That's the older history that you have over in Europe versus some of our younger.
Same water source, same family or not same family, but we are a family owned and operated business as well. So.
Wow. Well, here at Art Toolkit, we're just a big fan of Hahnemühle. And now in my head, I've been saying Hahnemühle, and I hear you say Hahnemühle. So
it's Hahnemühle.
Hahnemühle.
At the end.
Okay.
Hahnemühle.
We first got into your paper when we discovered these just like darling little zigzag books.
Aren't they fun?
Oh my gosh, they're so cute. And this is one I did at the zoo, and I use these all the time to also with my daughter and her friends when we go out on like little adventures. And this was one my daughter made on a camping trip. So like her and we've started expanding our line of papers and sketchbooks that we're carrying, and just recently got into on our website just these beautiful toned books that you carry in the beige and really beautiful gray. And I can put a link to these in our chat if anyone's interested. They're just gorgeous, and we could do a whole demo kind of painting on toned paper and watercolor, but I appreciate today that you'll give us some of the broader understanding of paper. So
in fact, Max Romney is on his trip this week. He is using, I believe he's using the gray paper just because of the Alaska tones and the natural landscape that he's in. It's just a beautiful paper for that. And again, the zigzag, as you mentioned, is just so much fun. If you wanted to, every morning on your walk by someone's flower bed and paint one of their flowers. Dogs you see, cats you see, that sort of stuff.
Oh, they're so darling.
Yeah. Well, thank you. If you'd like, I can jump into the slideshow, and you'll hear me talk. This is not a scripted thing, so that's one of the things I like to do is be a little bit more. And as I've mentioned to Maria, is she's going to pay attention to the chat room. I love an ongoing conversation. Let's make this organic. So if you have a question and it relates to the slides that I'm currently showing, please tell her to send that in, and she's going to tell me to quick pause a little bit so that we can answer that question with the number of people that are here. So, and then we'll also, when this is done, have a little discussion and question and answer period as well. So
absolutely. Yeah. Welcome all of your questions. All right, Joe, I'll turn it over to you.
I'll get started and start sharing this here screen, and we'll see if I can figure this out. Okay, so here we go. Pretty easy. That's the title. Paper makes a difference. And why does it make a difference? Is we know darn well that if you took a piece of copier paper, tore it in one direction and another direction, fiber grains are going to be different. If you say, hey, I just use an inexpensive drawing paper, but all of a sudden 6 years later, it's turning yellow on you. That's why paper makes a difference, especially if you want this to last 100 years or even 20 years for your loved ones to see. A little bit about myself. My last name is Domeier. I got the job 6 years ago to work for Hahnemühle in Einbeck, Germany. I was walking through the streets and I found Domeier Strasse. And I also found out that the brewery in Einbeck was at one time named after one of my distant relatives, Domeier. So it was one of those fate things. I've been in the art supply industry for almost 30 years, 35 years, both as a retail store owner and a manufacturer's salesperson. So where are we located? We're in a small town called Dassel, Germany. I'd like to call it a suburb of Einbeck. We are in the northern region of Germany, north of Frankfurt. We have our region is very much off the grid, and it's done not because we chose to be there. We have been there literally for 435 years, but because our mill is located in a region, a naturals park region or a naturals region in Germany that is 90% powered by solar, wind, or hydro. So 90 to 95% of our energy at the mill is using one of those three energy sources at all times. So we are restricted even on our water. We bring the water in many cases, it goes out cleaner because we're filtering it of all of the waste and pesticides from animal waste and or agricultural waste. So Green Rooster Initiative, we have a full line, and you'll see the different substrates later on of sustainable fibers. 5% of the sale of these products goes back to World Wildlife Funds, organizations such as that. Hahnemühle, since we initiated this in 2019 or 2018, I believe we've given upwards of, I believe it's 25,000 euro or more to these funds to restore trees, baby elephants, that sort of thing. The history of paper. So the history of paper.
In 5 minutes, right?
In 5 minutes or less. Yeah, what's our timeline?
Oh, we'll try and finish within the hour. We'll see how we go.
Okay, there we go. So the history of paper in a condensed version, because some of this can be very slow and meticulous. But we think of paper, the name paper actually is a derivative of the word papyrus. Papyrus is an Egyptian reed product that was always, as you see here, we get our reeds, the papyrus reeds. They get slapped and hammered, and then when they get soaked, they get darker, but they literally are laminated together by pounding upon each other and overlaying. So we don't necessarily call it paper in the current sense. The current sense of paper is manipulated vegetable fibers. So when you think of that, you go vegetable fibers. Well, cotton is a vegetation. Alpha cellulose products or tree pulp is a vegetation product. So these are manipulated, mulched up, ground up vegetative products that are being used. So the initial, what we know as our current day paper, really started in China in 105 AD, in which Roundup fabric was being used from the silk trade and the cotton trade, and they were using that fabric to make paper. There was one individual who created all of that. And here's kind of a real basic how they did it then, and they continue to do it today. These actually are photos from the Awagami factory in Japan. So they slowly but surely moved from China. From, there they really, what did you use? You use stone to translate information to the front lines of the Great Wall when you're doing battle or whatever it may be. Now they have paper that they can do this with. So it was very elitist. But this Japanese version is you have a frame with a screen on it. And this is much like, Maria, you had mentioned about when you were a child, you'd blend paper and put it into a screen and make paper out of it. Similar situation. Once it gets off the screen, they'll set them out to dry. And this is actually a modern, call it a modern factory, both these photos, because it is still being done this way in Japan and Taiwan and in China and in India. Many family units are making paper for the decorative arts industry and the fine art industry. So what happened? How did it get farther? How did it come out of China and from the Far East to the Asian West, I should say. So the path is that the story goes is that a Chinese silk trade train moving across Syria was attacked. That once it was attacked, a lot of the members of that train actually were prisoners, and they had paper making skills. So they brought paper making skills to the Syrian or the Western Asian world that we know it today. And then, of course, it expanded more and more and more into the African countries, the Northern African countries. Here's Syria in 751 AD, showing the Chinese techniques or the making of paper, to where you started to see paper being made more and more in the handmade versions in Spain, northern Morocco. So all of these images here are basically where you're still using that screen method. You're shaking that water out, flipping it, and then the bottom left here is hanging it to dry. And of course, the bottom right is they're using it or stacking the paper off. Paper press. So what a paper press was doing is that once you got the paper manufactured back in the 1700s, 15 to 1700s, is you would take that paper, and in between each sheet of paper, you would lay a piece of felt. And so that's why we call the texture of a paper felt. It's developed from the fabric that's layered in between the sheets of paper and pressed. And when they press it, the water's being squeezed out. As it gets squeezed out, it's absorbing, not absorbing, but it's getting embossed with that felt texture on the paper itself. 1806, a gentleman by the name of Henry Fourdrinier developed what is still to this day a product and a term that's being used worldwide in paper making, and that's called the Fourdrinier machine. And what the Fourdrinier machine, if you follow the purple, starts as a vat of water and pulped up fibers. It gets spread out onto a felt. That felt moves along the passageway here, and as it moves along, more water is drained out of it. And I'll show you in a little later when we actually show a piece of equipment moving. And at the end of this piece of equipment, so this was during the Industrial Revolution. This was a huge, huge step forward in England when it came to how paper was being manufactured. Ingredients for paper: pure water. We live in a limestone, our mill is in a limestone region in Germany, the Solent Hills region. So pure water. Cotton. So most folks look at cotton and they think of, and I'll show these closer when we're done. Here's a cotton ball, if anyone's seeing me up in the right of your screen. So those cotton balls are great. We get paper out of that. No, the cotton ball goes to the fabric industry. What we use are the cotton seeds. So inside this ball, I can squeeze this and you can feel cotton seeds in this ball. And these cotton seeds look like this. Here's one that I'll hang on a string right next to the camera.
So Joe, I don't know anything about cotton, but is that a byproduct from the clothing industry, or is that something they also use in fabric?
It's a byproduct of the clothing industry. So anyone who's making cotton paper is truly still using a byproduct of a much larger industry. And a lot of us in the art supply industry are left with that. If you go to, let's say you're a paint manufacturer like Daniel Smith, not so much Daniel Smith, because John goes all over the world to find ground up rocks to make his paints. But if you're gold and acrylic and all of a sudden you can't make Naples yellow anymore, why? Because the automobile industry and the house painting industry is no longer using that pigment. So there's no reason to mine that resource any longer. So we're almost always in the art supply industry a byproduct of someone else's larger. So the fabric industry takes that big puff of cotton. We get these cotton seed linters. These fibers from the outside of the seeds go to the paper making, and this is Fourdrinier, Hahnemühle, and Arches, and a variety of other cotton papers. And then the seeds themselves get either put back in the ground to plant, or they get made into cottonseed oil. So they'll process them for cottonseed oil. Cotton to wood pulp. So wood pulp is something that many of us are familiar with, but it was always a icky, don't use it type thing all the way up until the 1980s or so, early 80s. So when you think of a cotton newspaper, when we were making paper out of cotton from the 1860s, Civil War era newspapers, those newspapers literally remain white today, to this day. In many cases, you can look at a stored newspaper from those days, and it'll have that white tint and that white tone. Why? It's made out of cotton. Then you go to 1944, 1945, it's all yellow, it's all discolored, it's all brittle. And that's because of the lignin in the wood fiber. And this is another little hands-on. It's hard to do with video, but this is actually birch bark. So for instance, we make our wood pulp, our alpha cellulose, is what the term you'll see is actual wood pulp that's manufactured. We manufacture ours out of the lumber industry of the scrap woods there, out of poplar tree, which is what I was showing you there, or pine trees.
And what is lignin?
Lignin is the glue that holds the fibers together in the tree itself. Okay. So what we'll do is in the 1980s, 70s, and 80s, they started developing a way of drawing that lignin out of the wood fibers or the bulk pulp products, so that lignin is what creates the discoloration. It creates the acid issues in a paper. So you have to remove that lignin. We do all our papers at the mill. We do a lot of alpha cellulose product. It's still library 100-year archival quality product. In fact, we do not make anything that is not a product that we know will stand 100-year library process or museum process. So other items, sustainable bamboo. There's bamboo flooring, there's bamboo pillows, there's bamboo sheets. So bamboo has been something that back in the 1990s, they were starting to use it for paper and a variety of other products, but there really wasn't a sustainable agricultural system of bamboo in the world to do this. So now that bamboo flooring, there's about 20 different areas in the world now that have sustainable forests for bamboo. So it's not just China or the Far East that was taking care of our bamboo needs. The key about a bamboo as a plant, you cut it down every 3 years, it grows right back up. There's no digging it, there's no plowing it, there's no pesticides to it. It is a weed, so to speak. It's a grass, And it also does about 300% higher carbon emissions cleanup than let's say a pine tree. So bamboo is really a good material and a good fiber to use. I'll show a little later. I've got bamboo leaves here as well. We also are making paper out of, there's our images of the bamboo mixed media that we make in a bamboo sketch paper. It's a 260 gram heavier weight and then a lighter weight paper. Agave. A lot of folks have not seen this, and I'm sorry, but I don't have a tequila jug with me right now. I should have a shot right now. But the agave plant is a plant that literally all of the fibers around it, those leaves, they're for two different things. The core of it is going to be the tequila industry. They chop all those spikes off of it and create a core that gets heated and roasted and then extracted for the tequila. The other fibers get made into sisal, and the interior cores are used in the health and beauty industry because it is a succulent. So those succulents, just like aloe vera, is a great for sunburns, et cetera, et cetera. So agave is a wonderful paper. We make it only in a watercolor paper right now. I'd love to see this in a watercolor book eventually, but I've got to convince my German counterparts of the same.
We've been experimenting this and just might have one coming up with a little project. So stay tuned. I shouldn't say.
Yeah, we have a mini one that's only a 3x4 size or 2x3 size mini book. It's just really fun to work with. Super smooth and silky though with the brush. So hemp. It's not legal here in Minnesota, so I had to get the plastic version. So hemp as a whole has been used for paper for hundreds of years. Declaration of Independence, the Gutenberg Bible, Albert Durer did printing on hemp papers back in the day. So hemp, again, very sustainable. It grows like a weed, but again, it's gotten to the point now where it's planted and harvested just like any sort of row crop. The benefits to this is low water usage, less pesticide. In fact, agave, hemp, and bamboo are very, very low when it comes to the water usage. There's no irrigation needed as well when it comes to growing those plants. So you've got three really key sustainable fibers that we are beginning to use more and more in our packaging. I've got more and more inquiries on bulk purchases for the packaging industry here in the United States. So we're pretty excited about that. Being the first, we actually had the first who created a bamboo digital fine art paper as well for photography. So in fact, all of these fibers are available in digital format as well if you want to do digital photography.
Yeah, water is just something we're all growing more and more conscientious of, right?
Well, and it's one of those things where I don't want to diss the cotton plant. 10 times more water and irrigation than say pine trees or the other sustainable fibers that I showed here, because it's just a very almost overly intensive farming practice when it comes right down to it. You know, let it grow, let it no water at all. It dries out. They pick the cotton. Mm-hmm. So it needs that moisture to get to the size that it is. Coming up next year for the fine art industry, we will have a sugarcane paper as well from bagasse. And the sugarcane papers, the fibers and the bagasse fibers will be coming out of Puerto Rico and a variety of tropical states. So that has already started in the digital format. We have digital Hahnemühle fine art digital papers in this product. Again, 100-year lifespan, even though it's a byproduct of another industry. So how is paper made? So we take these fibers, reduce them down to their raw materials, create them into a mat called a linter sheet. That linter sheet then comes to the mill, and if we want to get a finer grade paper, we'll run it through, and I'm going to use my purple mouse here as we follow. We'll run it through what's called a Hollander. And this Hollander is a wood vat filled with water that has blades rotating in it. So it's chopping those cotton fibers or those wood fibers or those bamboo fibers into smaller and smaller and smaller pieces. Why do we want that? Well, in some cases you want it because the fibers, if they're too long, will create a rougher finish on the page. And if we want something that's fine, that's going to work really smooth with fountain pens, we want to have something that's a very, very fine grade. So this is one of those fun videos to watch. So what we've got here is a video, and we're going to show you that the stacks of linters are now going into, just like Maria, you said when you were young, you made paper in a blender. Look at this blender.
Oh, wow.
So at that point that I was showing you, and I think I can go back here. Yeah, let's play that one again. This is the point where we're going to add some additives to the product. So this is about 50% water, 50% paper pulp. But during this time, we're going to add things like sizing. And what sizing is, it's a chemistry that allows the paper to absorb more or less water. So it controls the absorption of water on the paper, especially important with watercolor paper. It's going to be when we add color to it. So if we wanted to get a toned or the gray papers that you mentioned, this is where we add a pigment because we want that color to go throughout the entire sheet of paper. And then thirdly, this is where we will add calcium carbonate. Chemistry again, guys, but chemistry with calcium carbonate is it encapsulates that paper fiber. So if, let's say, that fiber goes up against a high acid grocery store bag with a ton of acid in it, it's not going to leach into your paper if that's acid-free archival. So that's why, and everything I'm showing you here, folks, is not exclusive to Hahnemühle. It's really there to show you why maybe you are going to pay more for an Arches, a Fourdrinier, or a Hahnemühle product versus something that you might see at a lower grade or a discount store. So here are the three different materials we were talking about. The only exciting photo in this one is the center one. Otherwise, hey, it's white powder. So calcium carbonate, again, encapsulating that fiber. The dyeing and sizing their dyes are really cool when it comes to blending. Now, one thing you'll see on the paper shelf, and maybe not as much as it used to be, black paper is always the most expensive paper. It might be one of the most popular to buy at the art supply store, but it is a pain in the butt to clean up the mill when you're done making black paper. So that's where it's more expensive, because at that point, when you're done, you'll start with your lighter colors and then your darker colors when you're making your colored papers at the mill. And when you hit black, you got to clean that whole mill. You got to shut it down for almost a week to get rid of all the black fibers that are in that piece of equipment now.
Wow, little practical details. I haven't really thought about.
Yeah,
got to clean the paper mill.
One thing about Hahnemühle is we have been vegan and certified through Germany as vegan. Any of our paper products that we manufacture at our mill are 100% vegan products, no animal byproducts being used in the process, including the glues for our bindings. So that's always a very big plus. Long before everyone else was thinking vegan, it had started. The Fourdrinier machine, here we are for another video. The Fourdrinier is super fast when it comes to making paper. This machine here will run at about 130 meters per minute. So it's a very fast machine. So we have two types of machines, and I'll show you the next one in an upcoming slide. Thought I'd mute it so I could talk. So this machine, and I'll run the video again here shortly. This machine is going to be used for our very, maybe our drawing and sketch papers, maybe some of our more of our papers that are not going to be using heavy water concentrations on their surface. So I'm going to play it one more time, and this time I'll talk through it. If we look up over here, there are what's called spray heads. At this point, the water coming out is going to be about 40%, maybe 30% paper fiber, and the rest is water. By the time we get to the end of this video shoot, that paper is formed already. The water is extracted out. It's squeezed out by what's called a dandy roller, and I'll point that out here, to where it's then going off of this part of the machine onto a drying section of the machine. So here we go again. So you can see this blue right here. This is the felt, part of the felt. This is the dandy roller. So you can see there's liquid being pushed out of this paper as it moves along here. Water dropping through the felt as we come along here. And by this point, it's coming off the roller or off the felt and moving into larger rollers for the next step or the next process. So at this point, you're looking at a sheet of paper running between two large steel rollers. It's being pressed up against a fabric felt right here. You can see this fabric felt coming through. But this is where that fiber is already created. They're lined together with each other. The water's coming out, the moisture is being dried. These huge cylinders are actually heated with steam. So they're slowly but surely drying that as well.
Well, everything happens so fast also.
Yeah, again, when you consider 130 meters or 130 meters per minute, that's all the way to the end. I mean, that's very, very from start to finish. And by the time it's done with this machine, it's on a large roll at the end. So I talked about felt, and I just want to make sure everyone's aware of what a felt truly is. So every time we change to a rough watercolor paper or a Bristol feel of a smooth drawing paper, we have to change this fabric pad that is literally rolling not only in the liquid state, but it's also present in the heating and the drying state of that mill. So this linter or this felt could be upwards of 150 feet long, and it has to be woven in between all of those steam rollers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, that's terrific. That was something I was curious about is the different weights of paper and the textures, how you manage those. And
the weight is going to be more constituted around how that ratio of water to pulp when it comes out of the head. So if we want something that's going to be a heavier weight paper, we're going to add a lot more paper to the mixture, a lot more fiber, less water.
And we had a question too, asking about how the bamboo paper compares to traditional watercolor paper. And I think in some ways it's a little tricky, always apples to apples. In my little experiments I've been playing with, it's a little more of a smoother surface, the bamboo.
Bamboo's got more of an eggshell finish is what I would call it. More of a torsion ripple, not a heavily textured. And that's always an artist preference or an artist. If you want to talk about it on a technical basis, it has no surface sizing. And I'll show you later talk a little bit about surface sizing coming up.
Great.
What surface sizing will do is it leaves that moisture sitting on top. Most North Americans love surface sized paper. They don't in the German speaking nations. German speaking nations sell no surface sizing whatsoever in many cases on their papers. So what the surface sizing does is if you're a watercolorist and you do wet on wet techniques, that's going to stay open a lot longer with a surface size paper like our collection or like the zigzag books that you have or our watercolor books. Those all have a sizing on it geared for the North American market.
Yeah, we were just talking about that in the chat, how nice your watercolor sketchbooks play with washes and just they really handle beautifully.
And we've just introduced a cotton one, which again, our friend Max Romy is using up on the Kenai Peninsula this week. So
yeah, I think we may need to add that one to our collection, Joe. We'll chat later.
And it's literally, most folks will go, oh, it's going to be double or triple the price. We have it somewhere around 15 to 20% higher than the existing book. And the existing book is a beautiful book. It lasts for 100 years, but it's alpha cellulose. So this, if you think the one you have now can take washes, wait till you get to a cotton one.
I'll turn it up to 11.
Yeah. So then the next style of mill. So we had the Fourdrinier. Now we have the mold made. Now, if you're buying Arches 140, or you're buying a Fabriano Artistico, or you're buying a Hahnemühle Collection, Cezanne, Leonardo, those are all premium made on mold made machines. There are about 5 or 6 of these operable left in the world today. So there is no slide, or I don't have a video of this one in full operation. Wish I did. But what's different about it is instead of going at this 130 meters per minute, it's 30 meters per minute. So all of this is a spray head. So water's coming out of here with water and paper fiber. It's going down into a very large tank down at the bottom. And here's a better way of explaining it. The water comes in here, sprayed in here, goes around this large cylinder vat, or mold made. That's why they call it a cylinder mold. And there's actually a screen on this mold. So the water will come through here and collect on that screen, and then get picked up by what's called the couch roller up at the top here. And once that paper gets picked up, it moves on down the line. So that's a cylinder mold machine. Premium paper is being manufactured on it. How does a watermark get there? Well, the watermark, if we go back to this slide, is going to be on this cylinder right here. And so as the paper is being settled on the cylinder, it's not indenting the paper, it's preventing the paper from filling that gap. So that's where a watermark is different than an embossment. Embossment is stamping the image. A watermark that you see here are, for instance, this is our rooster. And then I'm also going to ask you to pay attention to this steel bar that's right here, or this brass bar. These are usually made out of brass or copper, because it'll appear in I think my next slide here. And there you can see up in the far left a watermark reflecting through one of our printmaking papers. So this video to me is the best. Get ready. So we talked about that bar. I'm going to have you focus right where the number 4 is here, just behind it. You can see there's a little gray line there. So that bar has created that little gray line because there's less paper where that bar was.
Oh, there you go. Get the beautiful edge.
So when you look at a paper and you ask, how do you get that deckled edge? Well, in the traditional sense, the Japanese origami papers or the Taiwanese decorative papers, those are screens that make one sheet at a time. Well, this is a machine that's actually, we can either do it in rolls because it's still slow, but if we want to get a deckled edge, these 2 outside edges right here, I'll run it again, the left and right side are going to be what's called a natural decal. And where you see it split, we consider that to be a torn decal. But it's still in the art supply industry. And this is, again, how our friends at Arches or our friends at Fabriano are doing their deckled edges when it comes to mass producing high-end watercolor paper. And there you see a deckled edge. What we're talking about is that rough textured fibrous edge. And you can see that one edge here has got almost a very, very consistent pattern to it, and the other doesn't. We talked about the speeds. So here's just a video that shows the difference. So the first one you're seeing here is going to be the mold made machine, the very, very slow 30 meters per minute. And there's a reason why it matters. So it's not just about speed. There's a reason why this speed matters. And you'll see it on the next slide. And here we have the same machine right next door. These are our actual machines. That was shot on my iPhone. So from left to right, you're walking in between these 2 giant pieces of equipment. And one's moving at this snail's pace and the other is moving at this high rate of speed. Why does it matter? Well, if you think of that liquid state that we first showed on the Fourdrinier, the first machine I showed you, that water is moving. It's moving fast. And so you've got these paper fibers lining up with each other. And they're lining up like a river would, or like if you threw a bunch of toothpicks into a moving stream, eventually they're all going to look like canoes going down. They all form the shape of the water. That's what's happening to the paper fiber. So when you move fast through that machine, those paper fibers all become in one direction, or they call it grain direction. Grain direction is what you'll hear used. That's the Fourdrinier machine. Mold made machine is different. Because it's going so slow and there isn't that high rate of speed, those fibers are intertwining with each other and crisscrossing with each other and making this very fine screened mesh almost of paper fibers. That's why if you took a sheet of mold made paper, watercolor, I usually term for watercolor, and set it next to a machine made paper and got them wet, this is what would happen.
Oh, that's fascinating.
On the far left, that's a mold made sheet of paper. And that's our collection series, we call it. And the far right is our harmony paper. So when you get the two wet, you can see one doesn't do the bridging or the arching. And that's because it's fighting each other. All those little fibers are fighting each other saying, no, don't bend, no, don't bend. Whereas the others on the right, they're all going, hey man, this is cool. Let's all bend together. So they're creating a bridging effect. You can't watercolor paint on the one on the right without stretching that paper. So and that's a mold made versus Fourdrinier, and that's about a 2-minute wait with water sprayed on it. Our brand, this is what you'll see in the store for our professional level product. It's called the Collection. We make the collection in watercolor papers in 640 gram or 300 pound. And then there's a 300 gram or 140 pound paper as well. And then we also make a pastel paper in premium and a cotton sketchbook or sketch pad in premium. And there we are. That's me at age 5 at my uncle's wedding. That was my first, I'd like to say it was my first beer, but I doubt it. So I grew up in New Ulm, Minnesota, which is a very German town with very strong roots in the polka music industry. So there we go.
Joe, this has been really fascinating. And especially thinking about just what's behind the characteristics of watercolor paper and paper, thinking about the bending versus staying flat and the sizing as well, because sizing is just so huge with watercolor paper performance and the different fibers.
They vary all the time in different fibers. And again, now that I've got a larger screen, here's a piece of our birch. Mm-hmm. Picked that up this weekend off the ground in northern Minnesota. We all kind of know what that is. Bamboo. So if you start looking at the bamboo industry, most of the bamboo industry is going to be coming, the stalks themselves, other than the sawdust or the dust that's created, is made into flooring, wood product. So that industry really runs us. So we get the leaves for paper and fabric. And then I mentioned before about the cotton. If you go to Michael's and you grab a cotton seed or your craft store and buy a cotton wad like this, just remember it's something that's been manufactured. If you look at if you go to like the Cotton Man in Georgia, you can get one with seeds in it. Uh-huh. And if I were there right now, Maria, I'd give you a bunch of seeds. You can plant them.
Oh, I wish.
And plant them in your garden. So
make sure I understand it correctly too, that it sounds like so many of the papers are made from byproducts.
Correct.
Cotton byproducts, bamboo. We've just had a question that bamboo papers are made from leaves, not the bamboo wood.
Correct.
And the agave
is made from the sisal fibers on the outside of that agave plant.
And then the alpha cellulose, which is wood pulp, also made as a byproduct.
And that's a different. I'll keep it real honest on that. I mean, that's a lumber industry byproduct when it comes to poplar. Mm-hmm. pulp, when it comes to pine trees, in many cases, every 13 years, they cut them down. And many of them are grown specifically for the high-end, high machined paper industry as well. They're specifically for paper. And we'll get some of that from our, but it's always a premium level lignin-free product. And
I forget if you mentioned in your presentation too, but Hahnemühle has been making just a great effort also, like solar power on the factory. Am I correct?
Yeah, 5% of our 5 to 10% is natural gas is being utilized only in the wintertime for a heat source in our offices, our production offices. On Earth Day this year, we're committed to using green inks when it comes to producing our boxes, et cetera, et cetera. We are committed to the environment right in our neighborhood. We had a volunteer, all the mill employees went out on Earth Day and planted, I think we planted over 2,000 trees.
Wow.
Within that region, all the mini startup shoots. And so we do a lot of environmental, we've got a lot more coming down the pipe as well. We realize that when all of a sudden Procter and Gamble calls us and says, can you tell us about your paper for packaging? There's a need and a want for it now, and it's about time. You know, when I started this industry in the art supplies, we would have hemp paper, but it was at an extremely high dollar figure to work on hemp paper, number one. And number two, there was still that mystique that every time you sold a hemp product out of your store, depending on who it was, thought it was something to roll paper out of, you know, and that's not what it is. It never was. It's still the highest use, maybe not dollar wise, but the highest use is still paper and rope and fibers, fabric fibers. So.
Oh, well, that's just fascinating. I'm just curious personally, do you have a favorite paper you like to use? Or
well, I do a lot of demonstration work. You know, again, I come from a background of a graphic arts history, doing airbrush work and illustration, but most of my illustration work was photorealism. So, but for instance, my wife is a watercolorist. She uses our collection 140-pound watercolor paper as opposed to an Arches. And then what I love to do is we have a watercolor postcard. And I'll be doing an event in Anchorage on Saturday. And what we're doing there is we're going to be having the kids paint on these postcards, put their addresses on these postcards. I'm bringing them back to me in Minnesota and mailing them back to them. It's trying to get that whole, instead of STEM, we want STEAM. We want art along with all that science about transportation and postage math and you name it. So I really love the postcards. It's fun, it's easy, and I don't have the attention span to do anything bigger than that.
So, I stand by, maybe the zigzag remains one of my personal favorites.
I was just going to say, what is yours?
Yeah, but I'm so excited to expand both what I use in my own practice and what we're carrying here at Art Toolkit. We've just been such fans and learning more about the whys of what's behind the paper and how it performs is really great show. And if anyone else joining us has any questions, I can take a couple more. Otherwise, we're just so happy to have you here with us and everyone who is able to join us live. And we'll have this recording up to share as a resource if anyone wants to review it or share it. Please stay tuned to Art Toolkit. Our newsletter is the place to hear about all of our upcoming events, workshops, live demos like this. And we'll keep tuned, and feel free to send us a message on Instagram or email if you have any requests on the product line in terms of papers and sketchbooks. And
feel free to reach out to Maria if for some reason you've got a group of 50 to 75 people in a watercolor group and an urban sketchers group. I'll come do a in person, or we'll do it online. The in person is really fun to do as well because everyone's going to get to really touch and feel some of these paper samples.
And I just saw one question from Ashley, curious if it's possible to purchase sample sheets just to get like a little sample pack from Hahnemühle.
Well, we don't have a sample pack of everything because, let's see here. This is our swatch book. This, all in the upper half, is watercolor paper. We have over 36 different watercolor papers. However, that said, you can send a message to Maria and get me a name and an address, and I'll send out, I guess what I would ask for you to send Maria is what medium you like. And I'll send out we have mini packs. They're about a 6x9 size package. And I usually put 2 or 3. They're all hand built here. They're in my office or in our office at Crystal Lake in Chicago area. And we'll just send you out 2 samples. We are very open to doing that as well.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thanks so much for that kind offer. And I think I've got just one more question that we've got time for. And then I see some others asking about the archival nature and the cold press versus hot press. And I think we covered that earlier in terms of the felt. Yeah. If people want to go back and review a little earlier.
Hot press is just ironed out a lot more. It's ironed out to where there's no texture.
And then finally, recycling. If there's anything special to think of with recycling, say cotton paper.
What we try, it's a very difficult balancing act. We recycle all of our own product and all our own fibers. We put it back into our papers automatically. We do not, however, take recycled fiber into the mill. And that's where we have to do that to remain at our high standards of quality for the artists. Because if we get a recycled fiber that's there, that all of a sudden we've got three literally train loads of recycled pulp that we can't use. We don't make newsprint, so we can't throw it into the newsprint batch and make newsprint out of it or make a cheaper grade paper. We just don't do it. But as far as recycle is concerned, yes, I could show you a video on that as well.
That might be a time for another day.
A lot of folks don't know we made test strips for the COVID-19 test. We were required to stay open, so we do a medical papers as well.
Oh, so, wow. Yeah. Well, I'll add too, as an artist, that I always am using both sides of my watercolor paper as well. Yeah. So if I've got some great paper that hasn't turned into sort of a final feeling painting, it's getting used, front and back, and every ounce of that enjoyed.
With 1 minute, can you do me one more favor?
Oh, yes.
Can we quiz how many people are left on the chat right now?
Oh, let's see. We've got about 25 folks with us live right now.
Wonderful. The first person to reply with this correct answer, I will send them a block of, or one of the zigzag books, not the mini, but a larger version of it.
Ooh.
Free of charge. Yep. Larger version zigzag. So here's the question. And I need Maria there to tell me who replies first. And you have to be willing to give your address up. How fast is the Fourdrinier machine running? How many meters per minute?
You didn't tell us there'd be a pop quiz, Joe.
That's only to those who stayed around all of the entire event.
Oh, we'll give everyone just 1 minute to see if someone can pull that together.
In the meantime, I appreciate you letting me to discuss this today. There's nothing I like more than nerding out on paper and art products. So
yeah. Oh, well, that's technicality. We don't have any. We've got Becky 37 meters, and then we've got Lisa 130.
Yep, Lisa 130.
Lisa, you got it. Lisa, I'll go ahead and forward your address to Joe. And we've got other people chiming in, but we've got darts getting thrown at the wall. I think you all are wonderful.
Oh, no, I know what they look like. Yep.
Oh, well, thanks for the little fun quiz there at the end, Joe. And everyone, again, just thank you so much for joining us. And stay tuned for more demos and little adventures and fun supplies to play with. All righty.
Thanks,
take care.
Guys. Bye-bye.
All right, Joe, we are off live.